The dark hall of the Grandview Cinema in Savannah, Georgia, pulsed with anticipation. The sweet smell of popcorn and the musty scent of old carpet created a cozy, almost nostalgic atmosphere. Luana, a film student in her early 20s, with keen eyes and an innate sense for tragedy, felt the dense air weigh upon her. It wasn't the weight of expectation for the premiere of Echoes of Death, but something more sinister. The screen trembled, an abrupt glitch that wasn't part of the projection. A short circuit sparked, illuminating the darkness of the hall for a fraction of a second. And, in that fleeting instant, Luana saw. It wasn't a projected image, but a vivid, terrifying vision. The seats in front, where seconds before families and couples sat, curled into ghostly flames, the velvet fabric melting in an unbearable heat. The smell of smoke, acrid and suffocating, invaded her nostrils, burning her throat, even though she knew it was a hallucination. A chilling premonition hit her, a sudden and overwhelming certainty. This wasn't a movie, it was a prophecy. It was going to happen. Luana's panic wasn't hysterical, but a cold electric current running through her veins, paralyzing her for a brief instant. The vision of the fire, vivid and almost real, seemed to have etched itself onto her retina, mixed with murmurs of disapproval and irritation at the interruption. A group of teenagers in the third row, including Chloe, a vibrant and optimistic 18-year-old, with electric blue hair and an easy smile, who was part of a local film club, exchanged curious glances. Chloe, with her infectious energy, seemed oblivious to the imminent danger, merely intrigued by the strange interruption of the screening. The cinema manager, a corpulent middle-aged man in a warm vest and a tired but firm gaze, approached Luana's row, frowning in disapproval. "Miss, we have no reports of any leak. The security system is state-of-the-art and was inspected this morning." But Luana's persistence, the conviction in her voice, combined with the sudden wave of anxiety she emanated, began to sow doubt in the audience. She feigned a violent, uncontrollable cough, covering her nose with her hand, exaggerating her expression of discomfort and dizziness. "It's strong, sir. I'm feeling dizzy and have a terrible headache. I swear I smell it. We can't ignore this." The vision of the fire dancing in her mind propelled her, each spark, each phantom flame, reinforcing her unwavering determination. Ben, observing her from the corner of his eye, seemed both amused and deeply intrigued, his relaxed posture now a little more tense, as if he himself was beginning to feel something. The mass of people began to murmur, some already standing, feeling the strange energy Luana emanated, a mixture of fear and urgency. The breeze coming through the half-open exit doors, brought by some spectators who stood up to see what was happening, seemed to bring heavier air, almost premonitory, laden with a premonition. The smell of popcorn, once so inviting and sweet, now seemed to have a bitter and metallic tang, mixed with Luana's alarm. Her plan was risky. The chance of being discredited and ridiculed was high, but the alternative was unthinkable. She could not, under any circumstances, allow that vision to become reality. The smell of burning lingered in her sense of smell, a phantom memory of destruction. Beside her, Ben, a film critic in his 40s, with well-groomed gray hair and an expression of intellectual boredom, cleared his throat, taking off his glasses to clean them. "Something wrong, Luana? You look like you've seen a ghost." His monotonous and slightly condescending voice was a stark contrast to the turmoil that agitated Luana within. She ignored him, her mind already in emergency mode, working frantically to find a solution. The hall, now bathed in the vibrant glow of the projector displaying the film's opening credits, seemed to close in on her, the red velvet walls narrowing, the ceiling decorated with golden arabesques lowering dangerously. Savannah's characteristic humidity, which had previously felt like a gentle and comforting embrace, was now oppressive, almost suffocating, making each breath an effort. She needed to act, but how? A fire in a crowded movie theater, with hundreds of people hypnotized by the screen, was a catastrophe with terrible consequences, a nightmare she couldn't allow to come true. The image of the seats in flames, people trapped in hell, repeated incessantly in her mind, a movie within her own mind. Time seemed to slip through her fingers, each second crucial. With a courage born of desperation, Luana gathered all the air she could into her lungs, closing her eyes for an instant to focus. "Gas leak," she shouted, her voice faltering at first, a mere whisper of panic, but gaining strength and resonance with each syllable. "There's a gas smell. It's very strong. We need to evacuate, now." Some muffled laughter came from the front rows. The evacuation was chaotic, a whirlwind of shoving and frightened voices, but, to Luana's relief, successful. Her panic, genuine enough to be contagious, his gray eyes now filled with deeper curiosity, almost astonishment. The movie, echoes of death, about trapped souls manifesting in scenarios of past tragedies, reverberated in her mind, its macabre scenes seemingly gaining a new and terrifying dimension. Something wasn't right. A sticky sensation, like invisible cobwebs, clung to her, a premonition that the story hadn't ended there, that this was just the first act of something much larger. The victory seemed hollow, tinged with growing apprehension, a certainty that danger still lurked. The air, previously merely humid and heavy with rain, now seemed denser, almost palpable, as if an invisible fog were thickening around her, bringing with it a supernatural chill that didn't come from the weather. The distant wail of an ambulance sounded, a prolonged lament that seemed to tear through the silent night. A requiem that seemed to portend something far more sinister than a simple isolated incident. "Intuition or beginner's luck, Luana. I thought it was hysteria. You really saved us." His eyes, however, scrutinized her with unusual intensity, as if he were trying to unravel a living enigma. Luana felt a chill, not from cold, but from a dark understanding. The premonition had not just been a fleeting sensation, but a disturbing window into the future, a glimpse of something that was predestined to happen. She had altered fate, or so she thought, for a brief moment of triumph. Chloe, in turn, was euphoric, her eyes sparkling with admiration and youthful enthusiasm. "You saved us, Luana. It's like a superpower. We could have been barbecued." Her vibrant joy was a stark contrast to the tension that still squeezed Luana's chest, a feeling that something fundamentally wrong still lingered in the air. Night continued to fall, and the city lights came on one by one, casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to writhe in the humid air, as if dancing with the secrets of the night. Made people move with an urgency that the reluctant manager eventually yielded to, fearing mass hysteria. The initial buzz and complaints turned into a constant stream of bodies out of the cinema, under Savannah's humid and now threatening sky, which was beginning to darken. Luana, her heart still pounding in her chest like a war drum, watched the street, the smell of impending rain in the air, heavy and metallic, laden with ozone. The crowd quickly dispersed into small groups, some curious, others visibly annoyed by the abrupt interruption of the premiere. Hours later, under a sky that poured down a fine, persistent rain, confirmation arrived, chilling Luana's blood and making her limbs tremble uncontrollably. A short circuit in the Grandview's old wiring had, in fact, set fire to some seats in the same section Luana had seen in her premonition. Luck, or what she thought was luck, had smiled upon them, averting an imminent tragedy. The police cordoned off the area with yellow and blue tape, the smell of smoke now real, permeating the air and the clothes of the people watching from afar. Police cars and fire trucks, their sirens at rest but lights flashing, filled the street, transforming Savannah's calm night into an investigation scene. Ben, leaning against a police car, adjusting his glasses, smiled wryly at Luana. Luana's initial satisfaction soon gave way to a persistent and growing uneasiness. In the following days, The strange coincidence of the Grandview fire made Luana a sort of local celebrity, albeit a reluctant one. The news spread quickly through the small community of Savannah, increasingly adorned with exaggerated details and theories about her sixth sense or her connection to the inexplicable, which seemed to have enveloped her alive, echoing a scene where the film's protagonist was literally swallowed by nature, her limbs bound by twisted branches. The sweet, suffocating aroma of dead jasmine and damp earth seemed to permeate the air around Luana every time she heard these stories, causing her nausea. Luana felt a chill down her spine, a freezing terror that spread through her limbs, paralyzing her, preventing her from reacting. The premonition, the fire, all of it had not been a salvation, but a cruel distraction, a trick of fate. It had been tricked, yes, but not averted. It had merely adapted, reconfiguring itself, finding new and more elaborate ways to manifest, and in an even crueler and inescapable fashion. The distant sound of sirens, once an alert for others, now sounded like a requiem just for her. A grim omen for what was yet to come, and she knew she was on the list. The buzz was constant, transforming the university campus into a stage for whispers, curious glances, and questions Luana didn't know how to answer. But for her, the external euphoria gave way to a growing sense of dread, a dissonance that echoed in her thoughts, a distrust that the universe was playing a cruel trick. The city, usually vibrant with the hustle and bustle of tourists, the soft sound of church bells, and the sweet smell of blooming magnolias, now seemed imbued with a sinister quietness, as if it were holding its breath, awaiting the next act. The strong Georgia sun, previously welcoming and inviting, radiated an oppressive, almost feverish heat that brought no comfort, but a suffocating sensation. Ben, ever the ingrained skeptic, tried to demystify the event with forced rationality. Coincidence, Luana. A lucky guess. The wiring was old. There's nothing supernatural about it. But his eyes, once merely curious, now showed a flicker of discomfort, a glimmer of doubt that belied his words. He observed her with an intensity that made her feel scrutinized, questioning her, trying to understand the inexplicable. Luana couldn't explain what she felt, the persistent image of flames in her mind, the certainty that there was more than just a hunch connecting her to something dark. She began to isolate herself, preferring the silent solitude of the cinema and mythology sections of the university library, instead of the crowded corridors filled with curious glances and whispers about her gift. It was then that the news began to emerge, whispered on campus like macabre secrets, published in small local newspapers that hid them on inside pages, and spread like a virus on online Savannah news forums, where tragedy became spectacle. The survivors of the premiere, the same people Luana had saved from the fire, were dying. Not in mundane car accidents, not from expected natural causes, but in scenarios identical to the most macabre and grotesque scenes of Echoes of Death. The first was a young literature student known for his passion for Gothic classics, found in his bathtub, drowned, exactly like one of the film's characters, who slowly died submerged in a bathtub full of dark and mysterious herbs. The smell of chlorinated water and soap seemed to hang over the news, even in her imagination, creating an aversion to water itself. The second victim, an elderly woman known for her lush garden and award-winning magnolias, was found in her backyard, covered by dense and suffocating vines. Luana's face, previously marked by anxiety and exhaustion, now wore an expression of pure terror, a horror that seemed to have ripped through her soul. Her eyes were sunken, with dark and bruised circles that betrayed sleepless nights and the internal battle she was fighting. An overwhelming premonition that she would be next on the list, the protagonist of her own tragedy. She began to obsessively analyze the movie Echoes of Death as if it were a deadly puzzle, searching for patterns, looking for a way to break the cycle, to find a loophole in fate, a weak point in the relentless narrative. She watched and re-watched scenes, meticulously jotting down details in notebooks scattered across her kitchen table, which had become her new research headquarters, trying to decipher the code, to find the key to stopping the imminent horror. The movie's dark soundtrack, with its dissonant chords and melancholic melodies, seemed to echo incessantly in her head, a macabre melody that refused to fade, a constant reminder of the terror unfolding in real life. The smell of dust and old paper in the university library, where she spent countless hours, became her refuge, a place where she hoped to find some answers in the dusty pages, but only found more questions and a growing despair. Savannah's humidity, which once felt like a gentle, tropical breeze, now seemed to penetrate her bones, slowly swallowing her. Luana remembered an article she had read about the ancient quicksand in the Okefenokee Swamp region, a vast and mystical swamp a few hours from Savannah, known for its dark legends and hidden dangers. A trap. Fate seemed to laugh at her, showing her exits that turned into new and more elaborate traps, each one more subtle, more treacherous, and more difficult to predict than the last. The humidity in the air increased daily, and Luana could almost feel the air thickening with the weight of inevitability, a premonition that her time was rapidly running out and death was lurking, making her tremble incessantly, not from cold, but from a visceral and existential fear. The news of the deaths of the cinema survivors were like dry blows to the stomach, each one a cruel reminder of her failure to truly save anyone. She hadn't saved anyone. She had merely delayed and reconfigured fate, making it even more perverse and creative in its execution. The city, with its cobblestone streets, its ornate Victorian houses, and its old architecture that once fascinated her with its southern charm, now seemed a somber stage for a macabre plot, where every corner, every dark alley, every shadow held a new and terrible trap. Ben, visibly shaken by the news, abandoned his skepticism as quickly as he had embraced it, his logical mind in tatters. His eyes, once penetrating and analytical, now reflected a mixture of confusion, apprehension, and a thinly veiled hint of dread. He called Luana incessantly, his voice low and hoarse, laden with an urgency she had never heard from her rational friend before. "You were right, Luana. It's as if the movie has come off the screen. It's manifesting in reality. This is insane." He seemed to be struggling to process the grotesque reality unfolding before them. "What's happening? We need to do something before someone else dies?" Luana had no answers. She merely felt the cold embrace of fate tightening around her, an invisible knot strangling her hope. Chloe, optimistic Chloe, once so full of life, was disoriented, her natural brightness diminished by fear and sadness for the losses. She called Luana incessantly, seeking solace and an explanation, but Luana had none to give, feeling exhausted, empty, and guilty. With each new death, Luana felt the shadow drawing closer. One of the most disturbing scenes in the movie showed a woman being suffocated by a sheet that suddenly transformed into quicksand. Luana's paranoia reached a fever pitch, turning each day into a minefield of fears and shadows. As if she could rewrite her own script, her tired eyes saw a rescue team gathering at an old, decrepit apartment building a few blocks away. The smell of gas, the same one she had faked at the cinema to save everyone, was faint, but unmistakably present in the air, a cruel reminder of her past intervention. A different premonition, an echo of the first, hit her with overwhelming force, like a blow to the chest. In the movie, a gas explosion devastated an old apartment building, killing all its occupants in an infernal and devastating blaze. Fate, always one step ahead, was recreating the scenario she had diverted, but this time, without her intervention and without escape. The local park, with its winding streams and gnarled trees, a lump in her throat that prevented her from screaming, from breathing. She couldn't warn people again, not without seeming completely insane or, worse, an insane accomplice to something inexplicable, a pawn in fate's game. She locked herself in her home, covering the windows with thick, heavy dark curtains. As if she could seal off the outside world and its dangers, as if she could isolate herself from the fate that pursued her. Daylight didn't enter, and the temperature inside seemed to drop. Even in Savannah's oppressive and stifling heat, a cold that came from within, not from outside. The silence was broken only by her own heart pounding wildly and uncontrollably in her chest, a drum of death announcing the imminent end. She was playing a cat-and-mouse game with fate, a game that seemed to have only one predestined outcome: defeat. And she was painfully losing. Was scratched off her list of safe places because of a drowning scene in the movie that terrified her. She refused to enter elevators, preferring to climb several flights of stairs on foot, her muscles burning after a scene of deadly claustrophobia that left her breathless. Food no longer tasted good. It was just a mechanical act to sustain her body in constant alert, each bite an effort. Sleep was a luxury denied by vivid and repetitive nightmares, where the deaths from the movie merged with real news, tormenting her relentlessly. Her mind, once agile and analytical, was now a battleground of fears, exhaustion, and a growing sense of inevitability. The wind, softly blowing through the windows, seemed to whisper her name in a macabre melody, a voice that tormented her day and night. Every shadow cast on her apartment walls, every sound from the street below, every smell that invaded her nostrils seemed like a premonition of the next trap, a sinister message from fate. Her home, once a sanctuary of peace and security, became a prison from which she couldn't escape her own fear, which intensified with every beat of her heart. She turned off her phone, ignoring the frantic calls from Ben and Chloe, whose anxious and worried voices became a burden rather than a comfort, just another source of pressure and guilt. With each new death announced, a new name on the news, she felt a knot tighten in her stomach, a chill that crept up her spine and lodged in her soul. The local newspaper, previously a vehicle for trivial and mild community news, now seemed like a walking obituary, its headlines screaming the victims' names with relentless cruelty. Savannah's air, with its constant humidity and the sweet, heavy scents of gardenias and magnolias, now seemed to have transformed into a damp, funereal breath, laden with omens and a sense of imminent death. She began to obsessively avoid any place or situation that might evoke scenes from the movie. One day, as she looked out her apartment window, Luana felt an overwhelming despair. Luana woke up in a cold sweat, her pillow damp and clinging to her cheek, her breathing ragged and irregular. It wasn't a nightmare. Finally managed to break down the door to Luana's apartment, which was locked from the inside. The air in the hallway smelled of smoke and something else, a heavy odor of sadness and despair, although there was no visible fire inside the apartment. The room was dark, the heavy curtains closed, blocking the morning light, but a flickering light emanated from the laptop screen on the bedside table. On the screen, Luana's recording continued, now with the Luana on the screen seemingly disappearing slowly, like smoke dissolving into the wind, her features blurring into a gray smudge until nothing remained but the background. In real life, Ben and Chloe found Luana sitting in her chair, motionless, staring fixedly at the screen with a blank, empty gaze. Her eyes, once so full of life, fear, and determination, were now opaque, reflecting only the dying glow of the black screen. The air in the room, previously merely humid, now carried a coldness that seemed to come from nowhere, a shiver that ran through one's bones, an echo of a life that was fading away. The screen went dark, and Luana vanished, not in a flash of explicit violence, not in a scream of pain, but in a silence that seemed to absorb light itself, sound itself. Fate, after all, had claimed its plot, its relentless narrative, and Luana had become, ironically, the final scene of her own inevitable story. It was reality invading her sheets and her mind. The sound of a siren, faint and distant at first, pierced the heavy and oppressive silence of the early morning, growing in intensity. It was an ambulance, or perhaps a fire truck, the sound approaching. The smell of smoke, now as familiar as the very air she breathed, hung in her room, dense and pungent. She knew. The building she had avoided, the one that smelled of gas, was on fire. The traps were becoming more subtle, more elaborate, more inevitable. Fate was closing in. She got out of bed, her legs heavy and shaky, as if she were walking through dense, cold water. In a ghostly white, July 19th, 2025. Tomorrow's date. The final hook of her own premonition. The last act of her story. The irony was cruel, a sadistic laugh from the universe. She had tried to cheat death, fighting with all her might, but fate, like a relentless and unwavering director, had merely rewritten the script, casting her in the lead role of the next and final tragedy. The smell of smoke grew stronger, the air heavy with Savannah's humidity and the unbearable weight of the inevitable. Her eyes, red and swollen from sleep deprivation and fear, scanned the room, looking for an escape, a loophole, any path to safety, but there was none. The dark curtains sealed off the outside world, but the danger was now inside, with her. Fate had cornered her, walling her in her own home. On her laptop screen, which she had left on her bedside table with the movie Echoes of Death paused on a generic scene, she saw something that made her stop breathing. A scene she had never seen before. It wasn't part of the movie she had watched repeatedly. It was a recording, a home video, and the face on the screen was hers. The Luana on the screen was smiling, a sad and resigned smile, with melancholic eyes, in a setting she didn't recognize, but which felt strangely familiar, like a distorted déjà vu. The recording date flashed in the corner of the screen. Ben and Chloe, desperate and distressed after days without contact.